Because Colorado has no oversight, no regulation, no public data anymore. It's all in the dark, so we don't know who's the abortionist, what are their credentials. There's no credentialing process in Colorado. Anybody with a license can do an abortion. I mean, it doesn't mean a physician license either. So it's really kind of a wide open, it's the Wild West here, is what it really is for abortion.
All right, welcome back to Caring for Both, a Curbside Consult Series by the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or also known as APLOG. On this podcast, we bring on experts to provide insights to support you as a medical professional in your life-affirming practice and career. I'm your host for today, Jordan Butler. I am the new communications manager for APLOG. And today we're getting to talk to someone who I believe we've talked to before, but this is really exciting because she's a part of the first APLOG chapter in Colorado. And just a little bit of backstory on Colorado. It has some of the most extreme abortion laws in the United States, with abortion allowed up until birth. And for about 50 years, the Border Abortion Clinic was operated under Dr. Warren Hearn, and he performed late-term abortion until its closure earlier this year. But that is not the end of the story. Rise Collective opened in October 2025 and continued late-term abortions without the oversight required for other surgical centers. As the first state chapter for the American Association of Pro-Life OB-GYNs, APLOG Colorado is leading the efforts to educate the public about the risks and the realities of second and third trimester abortions. Recently, they hosted an event in Boulder titled Challenges to the Health and Safety of Boulder Women, shedding light on the lack of regulation and accountability in these facilities. They also held a rally for women outside of Rise Collective, with numerous pro-life groups making their voice heard. And I'm happy to say that I got to join you all for that and excited to talk about that more. Today, we're going to have on Dr. Catherine Wheeler, who is a former abortionist and now a pro-life OB-GYN who helps spearhead APLOG Colorado with other incredible leaders, which I'm sure Dr. Wheeler will talk with us about. She'll also talk to us and walk us through the landscape of abortion in Colorado and how APLOG is truly making a difference. Dr. Wheeler, thank you so much for your time and for joining us today.
What an honor it is to be with you again, and to all the pro-life medical professionals and everybody else watching.
Absolutely. Well, let's just go in with a little bit of backstory and history. So, to my knowledge, Colorado was the first state to decriminalize abortion in the 1960s. Why do you think this state has become such a focal point for abortion policy across the country?
Yeah, I kind of think being first had a lot to do with when you think about Colorado, you think about being able to do what you want to do. I think that's the vibe here. It started with drugs and other things. So Colorado became a leader in what a lot of Coloradans are proud of, which is a kind of what they consider personal freedoms and trying to keep government out. So I think that they were very early in the women's movement that got dovetailed by abortion after the sexual revolution. Of course, you can't have a sexual revolution without contraception and abortion. So those two dovetailed together. And Colorado has always been one of those kind of feeling like you're free places. So I think that made us front and center. One of the big concerns at that time when they passed the first law liberalizing abortion in 1967 was, as the governor said, we don't want it to be an obstetric Las Vegas, and that'll be an abortion mecca, were some of the concerns. And of course, everybody was assured there were safeguards, it wouldn't happen. But of course, that's exactly what's happened here.
Very much a slippery slope type of situation in Colorado. and we're going to get, again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we're not only talking about, late abortion in the second, third trimester, but the lack of regulation and safety, quote unquote, around it.
Right.
And we'll get into that in a little bit. But in my opening, I mentioned Dr. Warren Hearn, who's kind of, I hate to say it, was a national celebrity in the abortion world. There's, been high profile articles about him in publications that a lot of Americans read. And then he recently closed his practice. And so I kind of alluded to it a little bit with Rise Collective. But what was the impact of that closure with the abortion industry in Colorado?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things about Dr. Hearn. First, he didn't use euphemisms. He was out front with exactly what he did with no apology. And he at least appeared to have some pride in trying to do a less harmful job, less risky job for the woman. He, of course, believed that a baby had value if the woman said it had value. But he didn't call it anything other than abortion. And, of course, he limited his practice to second and third trimester abortions, was honest that 70% of the babies he aborted were healthy. There was nothing wrong with the mom or the baby. That's in his published data. As he's retired, and he also made a point of saying, there's two kinds of abortionists. There are the ones who just have this ideal, which is why they call him a hero. But then there's the commercial side of it, and there are people who do it just for the money. And abortion is very lucrative. So he made that distinction. It would appear to us that his employees who then restarted a new facility, they seem to be more on the profit-driven side from what I can see. So they've expanded first, second, and third trimester abortion, really have moved into, just like Planned Parenthood has, drug-induced abortion, and they've moved into so-called gender care. So it's an entirely different model that's a lot more expansive. Warren Hearn actually developed a lot of the late abortion protocols, developed instruments. We don't know what's going on inside this facility because Colorado has no oversight, no regulation, no public data anymore. It's all in the dark, so we don't know who's the abortionist, what are their credentials. There's no credentialing process in Colorado. Anybody with a license can do an abortion. I mean, it doesn't mean a physician license either. So it's really kind of a wide open it's the Wild West here, is what it really is for abortion. So I think what it's done is, we all celebrated that people, because he had a lot of people from out of state, that this wasn't happening to the moms and the babies. But it's been expanded with his absence.
Yeah, and there's a couple things to that. I mean, first off, like this is just me kind of having a common sense approach here, like trying to not look at it as, pro-life or pro-choice, but if I go to a doctor's office website, like I can see all the doctors, I can see, where they went to school, where they once went, all the reviews, but with Rise Collective, I can't see anything, right? Like nothing at all.
That's right. That's right. We have absolutely no idea who is actually working in that facility. We don't know if it's because there are traveling abortionists who go from state to state, and Warren Hearn had one of those. So we don't know if it's one of those abortionists. We don't know if it's a medical doctor. We honestly have no idea who the abortionists are, but we know that they're advertising all trimesters, and whatever reason you say is a good reason.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about how, Dr. Hearn was, for better or for worse, very upfront about what abortion was. And I remember we had this conversation, it was very brief, and you may or may not remember it, where I said, Rise Collective, it sounds very uplifting. Like, you wouldn't exactly know what Rise Collective was unless, someone like you, Dr. Wheeler, sat me down and told me what they did. I never would have guessed. So it's very, I would say, very deceptive. Would that be kind of an accurate way of putting it?
It definitely puts a positive spin on what they're doing. There's no doubt about that. And, Warren Hearn, he called his facility the Boulder Abortion Clinic. You knew
Yeah.
what it was. And, in a state where when I moved here 6 years ago and I was told that abortions are done until the due date, I said, that doesn't happen. I mean, we are so trained to say that doesn't happen, that's a lie. And then you go look it up and you're like, oh, actually, it does. And it's not just for rape, incest, harm to the mother. It's not, or even anomalies, which is sad. So here in Colorado, we have 3 times the national average of late abortions after the age of viability.
That's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
and you might not have the number off the top of your head, but you said 3 times. Like, is there a number for that, like in the thousands somewhere?
It was 468, but here in Colorado, it's about 12. The last data that we have, which is probably the last data we're going to be able to get, is from 2023, and it was 12% were done after the first trimester, which nationally it's about 3 to 5%.
So, just kind of on that same vein, then you guys clearly have, I think, justified concerns. And I think whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, like this would be a legitimate concern if you have no idea who's doing these and if it's unregulated. So talk to me a little bit about your role in this and APLOG Colorado and what you guys are doing to bring awareness about what is going on at Rise Collective.
Yeah, so there are multiple organizations that are very concerned about this. We're the medical voice. That's what APLOG does, is we're equipped to defend both of our patients. And so we're the ones who actually have the authority to be able to speak about what the risks and the harms are, both immediate risk and long-term risks to the mom and future pregnancies for her. So our role is the medical voice, but we're there with multiple organizations as a representative locally from Boulder with the 40 Days for Life. There was somebody who'd been very active with the Pregnancy Resource Center there for decades, who had been involved initially in educating the public about alternative resources for help. We have a Lutheran pastor who is there at the University of Colorado. Who else is with us? Students for Life, Respect Life actually was with us. And there are multiple other organizations and speakers for our original event. So it is multiple organizations who see what the risk is for women. We see that the baby dies too. But women are being lied to about the risks. They're being told that it's as safe as first trimester. They're being told that it's very low risk, when we know at least 10% in the second trimester with surgical abortion will have a complication. We know that at least a third of them who do drug-induced abortions are going to have a complication. So, and we know that by the time you're 18 weeks, the risk is twice that of childbearing. These women are sent to a local hotel if they're in the later abortions. They're induction abortions. They're do feticide on the first day, send them to a local hotel. They come back every day for more and more cervical preparation, and on the third or the fourth day, they're given the final induction. But most of this induction process, if they're not from Boulder, they're in a hotel room. Unobserved. I mean, I just can't imagine doing an induction of labor outside of a hospital facility with no one to help her, no one for pain management. They're entirely on their own. If she happens to deliver in the hotel room, just call us. We'll come. That's not medical care.
It's certainly not. And so in regards to like when, for example, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the rally that you guys did and then also some of your events. But I remember there was a time during that rally where, you were talking to a man and he didn't really seem to know what was going on. Do you find that that's the case when you engage in these conversations with Colorado citizens, that once they're educated, like there's a little bit of a mind shift or it kind of gets them thinking?
Yeah, that's 100%. I think the most important thing I ever do is have a conversation. And I think everybody listening can learn to have these conversations. And, coming out of having been an abortionist and believing everything at a surface level, and then getting to the point where I started to realize that what I believed was not true and having to look for myself. So I'm always remembering as I'm talking to people, they actually just don't know. And so we can have a conversation. They can tell me what's in their head about it, and I can relay my experience or ask them more questions to understand their view, like, what do you base that on? And I can say, well, here's some information. I can share information that's factual, that's current. I can give them references and resources, and they're always shocked. That's not what they say. I say, I know that's not what they say. My encouragement is to go look for yourself. And they're always stunned. Once you listen to them and engage in a conversation, they'll engage because they actually want to know what's true. These people really think they're helping women and standing with women. That's the narrative that's been put in our head. And once you start telling them what the abortion is, or telling them about the harms, or telling them that there are resources available, there's help available, they start listening, going, I didn't know. I just didn't know.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about your approach and APLOG's overall approach is about having respectful and civilized dialogue. And that can open a lot of doors to change hearts and minds. So doing the rally, and let's actually talk about that, about some of the events that you guys have done to respectfully, but, with courage and strength, raise awareness for what's going on. So just kind of unpack that for me, some of the things that you guys have been doing.
Yeah, so our original event was to educate the public, and we also reached out to the tenant holder, the leaseholder, hoping that they would also show up, because my belief is they just don't know what's really going on and how risky it is. So we actually put together an event at the Boulder Library and had a pretty good turnout, I thought. I had some really great questions afterwards. I always love the questions afterwards. But what we presented was what's been the history of abortion in Colorado and specifically in Boulder. And one of the Boulder residents did that, Susan Gills. And then, having been an abortionist, I could explain abortion and the harms. Dr. Peril also could talk about from the policy and the lack of regulation standpoint. Dr. Tom Peril is another of the Colorado leaders. He's an internal medical physician with a lot of work in advocacy and in policy. So he could talk about what's normal for regulation in healthcare and why that is, and what's so odd about things that are so risky as later abortion not being regulated for the safety of women. And then we had somebody talk about a young woman. She's a friend of a family member of this woman who died last year at 18 of a 20-week abortion. I think she was 22 weeks, actually, of a complication. There were reported delays in transfer, and she ultimately passed away. And so she was able to talk about what happened there. And then to present, like, there are alternatives. So we had somebody talk about what alternatives, what resources are there available in Boulder. Now, the rally was different. The rally, what we're trying to do is just be on the sidewalk and raise awareness of harms. And so it was very peaceful. It was just people out there. There were about 50 of us. With the hope of having these conversations, of having some media attention so that we can help the public to understand what these harms are and the need, if they're going to do late abortions and call it health care, for the sake of the women at least, because we care about both, for the sake of the women at least, it should be regulated for safety.
Absolutely. I got a chance to attend that rally, and there were so many different pro-life groups that joined together, and it was a fantastic turnout. And I remember one of the things that you guys were talking about with Rise Collective and was about their lease, a petition that you guys were doing. Can you explain a little bit about that as well?
So again, our initial approach was to help the leaseholder, maybe put some pressure there to educate him about what the harms are. He's a dentist, so I wouldn't expect him to understand OB-GYN or so-called reproductive rights. So we wanted to educate him and maybe put some pressure there that maybe he didn't want to be leasing to somebody who was placing women at risk. We'll be shifting that petition to engage the public with upcoming regulation at the legislature, trying to get this regulated like the rest of healthcare, which would make us aware of the harms also, and hopefully either our hope would be to be eliminated because it is unsafe and puts women at risk, but at least to provide regulation and so that women know it's not as safe as they're telling you.
I think that's a fantastic approach. And in regards to our listeners today, what are some ways that they can get involved or help spread awareness about protecting women's health?
Yeah, I think for just anybody who's medical or non-medical, conversation's number one. I'm always struck by how abortion got deep roots because of the silence. People weren't opposing it. People weren't standing up against it for the truth. This creation of a so-called need for abortion, like what a horrible thing to tell women, yeah, you have to have an abortion available to you for you to participate in society. Like that's not a just society. So how can we stand alongside women so that they don't believe this false narrative that you can't have children, you need to have an abortion? So I would think, for me, the conversation's critical. Providing some kind of support network for the women, pregnancy resource centers, obviously. Churches need to stand up and do this better. Some are doing fantastic at this, but a very large number are not stepping into this space and offering help and hope. And for us medical professionals, absolutely decide you will have nothing to do with anything that purposely takes the life of your patient. Decide that before training. Get with the young people who are in training and support them. They're in a hard environment now. So support your local medical students, midwife students, anybody pharmacy students, they're the next wave. They're going to have the pharmacist dispensing it with no medical oversight. Every single medical professional needs some support in making that decision. I will never be involved no matter what it costs. I won't watch it. I won't see it. And we have to change our laws because laws shape our society. And then lastly, life-affirming medicine. What we offer is supporting life for women and their children. And the whole focus is I do everything I can to maximize the health of both of my patients. And you're not getting that in the medical system anymore. So the life-affirming medicine is what women are looking for. They want people who care about them and their baby. So we need to be standing proudly together, supporting each other, and advocating for both of our patients.
I love what you said about how silence kind of creates an issue. And I'll make sure I put this in our show notes, the APLOG Colorado website, where it shows you guys are certainly not silent and that you guys have been very outspoken. And I know Colorado needs that. And the preborn children in Colorado need that, and the women there. So thank you. And just to end this off, I would just ask you, just as now a former abortionist, now you're pro-life OB-GYN, is there anything else that is on your mind that you'd really want people to know, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, just about what abortion really is?
Yeah, I'd have to move past all the euphemisms. I've learned to... Gosh, when you see it for what it is, it's absolutely heartbreaking to have participated in that. To be honest, I see myself as a Holocaust Nuremberg doctor. They told us to do something, I did it. And I actually opted in, but I believed it was what I was supposed to do. We believe a narrative that a woman choosing to end the life of her child is in her best interest. It is never in her best interest. So I see abortion now as telling a woman, look, you're pregnant, you don't want to be, or it's a hard situation. And you're just going to go in some black box and come out the other side. It'll be like it never happened. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie. What happens in that black box is what really matters. And we have to start talking about abortion as what it is. The world's been trained to not see the baby. The medical profession has been trained to not see the baby. We have to talk about the baby. And I say baby most of the time in public. I've quit saying fetus. I know it's a medical term, but you know what? We've got to personalize, humanize that child again because their lives are at risk. Every pregnant woman with a baby, that baby's life is at risk. What a horrible place to be in a society. So I know it sounds harsh. I know that a lot of people aren't so happy with me anymore, but that's the reality. What abortion actually is, not a euphemism of women's rights, and what happens to that poor, dear, innocent child.
Yeah, and I just appreciate you, being willing to speak about this and just being very honest, and all the work that not just that you're doing in Colorado, Dr. Wheeler, but I know you've named many others that are working tirelessly alongside of you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and just talking with me a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to add one thing because I know what I say sounds really harsh. But having been an abortionist, like I had somebody ask me on an airplane one time people when you say I was an abortionist, when you see the reaction on their face, you know that everybody knows in their heart it's not good. 100% of the time, that's the reaction I get. And he said to me, when you've done something so awful, how do you ever get up? And he wasn't being mean. It was just like when you realize that you've taken the lives of children, how do you get up? And I would just say to anybody out there who's been involved or had an abortion, there is healing and forgiveness available. I always want to say that. It's not the end of your life. There's a way forward. And I would love to connect with anybody who's just holding that heavy and hasn't found forgiveness and healing.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad that you said that portion of forgiveness and that there is path forward.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that you have, and I know many other women and other abortionists or abortion facility workers have also found healing and have used their voices as well. So, Dr. Wheeler, again, thank you so much for your time and for your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. And to every other state out there, you need to be a chapter. Your state needs a medical voice, people on the ground standing together for women and babies. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And if you are a pro-life physician interested in starting a chapter, you can reach out to us. I'll make sure that I put that in the show notes below. And thank you as well to our listeners for joining us today. If you like this episode, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe on YouTube. Or if you're listening on a podcast app like Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, make sure that you give us a 5-star review. We have some exciting things coming. I know I teased it in our last episode, but the podcast is continuing on, but there will be a slight rebrand. You're going to want to hear more about it in the next episode. So I'll hope that we'll see you guys there. Thank you.